They began to talk about this thing that had come into their lives. They did not have a name for it. They called it the evil thing. Kabu said, perhaps the gods were absent-minded when they dropped the evil thing on the earth. They've always sent us only good things, like the rain and the trees and roots and berries to eat, because we are their children and they love us. But now they've sent us this evil thing.
A man in Africa who has no knowledge of the modern world goes on a quest to get rid of an evil thing, a Coca-Cola bottle that fell from the sky. This week, special guest Joanna Brief joins us to discuss why a white guy in Africa says a Yiddish expression, a questionable use of the song Rockabye Baby, and the comedy appeal of a terrorist who slips on banana peels. Then we find out if 1980's The Gods Must Be Crazy stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with the glutton. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Test of Time podcast. My name is Alan Noah, and I seem to be having a problem with my monitor because I'm seeing two briefs. Is that right?
One brief. What? Two briefs? That's right. Usually you just get your run-of-the-mill James brief. But this week...
Bonus brief.
Back for her fourth visit to the Test of Time podcast.
Yes.
Is my sister Joanna Brief.
Hi.
Welcome back, Joanna.
Thank you so much. Honored.
Well, the honor is all mine. I assume maybe a little bit for James, but like your brother and sister, so like it's probably mostly my honor.
No. It's his. It's his.
So, Joanna, welcome back. How are you doing in the pandemic? You hanging in there? You doing all right?
Yeah, hanging in. How about you, man?
Oh, okay. It's been a while since we've seen you on the podcast. And I think even in real life, probably the last time I saw you was James's birthday dinner last year.
That's right. I'm sure I can speak for most of America that when I say that the Test of Time podcast has been carrying us all through this horrible year.
You know, we don't like to say that ourselves, but now that you said it, I mean, yeah, basically.
You're welcome. I mean, I'm speaking for everyone. Anyway, I'm sure you guys are really humble.
Welcome to the podcast that's been called the Savior of America.
Called right now by you before you said that we're so humble. So why are we talking about The Gods Must Be Crazy this week?
You know, it randomly came up on one of these, the 40th anniversary of this film, and I knew this film from childhood because we used to go away to this place that had no cable television and had an antenna that would sometimes pick up Hartford airwaves, and there was really nothing to do. And if you wanted to watch a movie, your best bet was the random VHS tapes that we had.
Was this place that you're talking about near Hartford? It would be very strange if you were talking about a place in like Alaska or something.
The Connecticut Berkshires.
It was in the Berkshires.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very rural and absolutely no, if any, TV reception. So we had these ancient VCRs, you know, the kind that actually pops up 3D style, you know, vertically.
Oh, wow.
And we had a few VHS tapes that would circulate with episodes of this and this tape from television that. And The Gods Must Be Crazy is one of these movies that we watched infinity number of times. And I barely remember it, but it's, man, it was truly trippy seeing again after all these years. One of these movies I was like, if you asked me what it was about, I'd be like some guy in a Coke bottle, I think. And man, it was trippy seeing again.
This is one of those films that I barely remembered, but I really wanted to see how this film held up.
Yeah, you know, I had never seen this movie before, but I definitely have memories of seeing it in the video rental store and always being kind of curious about it, but like never curious enough to actually, you know, rent the damn thing and watch it. I mean, I guess I could have as a kid. There's nothing horrifically inappropriate, I guess, other than the attempted murder of children. But, whatever. It's only attempted murder. So, why don't we get into the movie and explain it for people who haven't seen it? It's about an African man named Key. It's spelled X-I, but they call him Key, who has never had contact with the modern world. One day, Key and his tribe come across a Coca-Cola bottle, a strange device that the tribe assumes is a gift from the gods. At first, the tribe finds the newfound device to be helpful in many ways. However, they soon find themselves jealous and angry with one another, two emotions they'd never encountered before they found the bottle. Deciding that the bottle is evil, Key decides to take it to the end of the world and throw it away. On his journey, he meets and interacts with several people from modern society, including a nervous biologist, a timid schoolteacher, and even a group of rogue revolutionaries. Those are the people who are doing the attempted murder that I mentioned earlier. So this could not possibly have been a big box office juggernaut in 1980, unless maybe it was in places other than the United States, James?
Well, Al, what if I were to tell you that The Gods Must Be Crazy is the first of, there's official and unofficial sequels, but there are 5 movies in the Gods Must Be Crazy universe.
Empire.
The Gods Must Be Crazyverse.
Right, although the writer, director, creator says that only the first 2 are official and all the others are cheap knockoffs that don't even deserve the Gods Must Be Crazy name.
Right. But as I'm hinting, the film actually was a sizable hit. It connected with audiences, and I've seen differing anywhere from $3 to $5 million was the budget, but it took $60 million worldwide. So, this is the kind of film you can tell was filmed for. They even spent $5 million on some of this stuff. The film is filmed very interestingly. There is a voiceover that I know you dislike voiceovers, but it's narrated by this man named Patty O'Byrne, and he has this fantastic, almost like a nature documentary, Richard Attenborough, that kind of voice. And he meets the people that they refer to as Bushmen. That's a term that they use in this film, and I guess we should talk about that for a second, Al.
Yeah, it seemed to me like, is that word offensive? And I spent just a couple minutes Googling it today, so I'm not going to pretend to be an authority on the subject, but some people find it offensive, and some people say that it's actually not at all offensive, and some people refer to these people as the San, S-A-N, as like the name of the tribe, and some people say that word is very offensive. So it seems like it's just up for debate. So I don't really know, but obviously it's not our intention to offend anyone. We can discuss how the movie's portrayal could be described as offensive or not offensive as we make our way through this episode.
The point is that these are people from the Kalahari Desert, which is in the southern part of Africa, in the South Africa, Botswana region. They don't have any contact with modern civilization. So the way this nature documentary, the narrator talks about it, he says, these people have never seen an airplane. When they look at an airplane, they think it's these strange birds in the sky that make funny noises and sometimes leave trails, and it must be the gods.
It must be the gods' flatulence.
Right. It must be the gods' flatulence. But I don't know particularly if these people exist in Africa for real that have no contact, but there's definitely people in Brazil that have zero contact. There was that famous story a couple of years ago about that island off the coast of Sri Lanka that has no contact, and then some missionary guy tried to go there and they killed him.
It was part of the controversy of this film that the San people, which I did not find anywhere was offensive. That's interesting, and I apologize for using that term. That was on Wikipedia and most of the stuff I read. But that people, the way they were portrayed as being, completely ignorant of modern society is totally untrue, and they live in extreme poverty, kind of like American Native Indians. Like, their land was taken, and they subsist completely on the government. It was a controversial film for a lot of reasons, and I think that's one of the reasons. It was showed as a simplistic, beautiful, happy culture of just peace and simplicity, and it's really a culture that was totally ravaged, and it's nothing like that anymore. mostly because of the apartheid government's treatment of those people and other peoples like that.
Right.
This film just kind of skips over that, even though the reality of what you assume is Johannesburg that they show is probably a city with a lot of problems, especially in 1980. But at least from the perspective of this film, the people in this tribe are shown to be very resourceful. In the beginning, they're shown to be very tuned to the land, and they know how to find water in a desert. And in the universe of this film, they're a very self-sufficient, happy tribe that doesn't really need any outside interference.
And then they sort of make the point that they are the ones who are really smart. And it's us, the quote unquote civilized people, who we don't understand how to adapt to our environment. So we make our environment adapt to us. And isn't it crazy how at 7:30 in the morning we have to get up and go to work, and then at 10:30 we have to look busy, but then at 11 o'clock we can not look busy for 15 minutes. And all of this is delivered in voiceover, which, yeah, I do think is kind of heavy-handed. It is maybe like an interesting sort of thesis statement, and I was like, okay, I'm intrigued by this. Is that what this movie is trying to say? Is it making some statement with a capital S about civilized society? But it's kind of not really, because then it just sort of devolves into this farce as the movie goes on.
I will say, Al, that I agree with you that little montage, this is one of the only things I totally remembered from this film for years, and I did find it fascinating. And I will say that perhaps the depth of that montage is not carried over for the rest of the film. I'll admit that.
Right. Which is a shame, because it's really interesting. Like, it did hook me. I was like, okay, I'm with you. I'm going with you. So speaking of like interesting concepts in this movie, I thought the bottle thing was kind of cool, where this bottle falls from the sky.
Well, it doesn't fall from the sky. It's a guy in an airplane just throws a glass Coca-Cola bottle out.
But for Key, it does fall out of the sky. I couldn't help but thinking, would that break?
I did wonder a couple times.
So many times.
This bottle should have broken. But on the other hand,
they don't make them like they used to.
Coca-Cola glass bottles, those things are meant to be refilled. Not just returned and recycled. They are cleaned and refilled.
No, I thought that a couple times too. I'm like, they are using the shit out of this Coke bottle. And they're literally throwing it up and down, and it keeps hitting people in the face, and they're pounding stuff like, what are we to believe?
Well, then again, the thing in the movies when you see a bar fight and the guy just smashes a beer bottle on your face. No, it's actually more likely you might just, smash a glass bottle in some guy's face, and it's just going to be like smashing a bar in his skull. It really might not break.
For some reason, I imagine that the Coke bottles are more durable than a beer bottle. I don't know if that's actually true. And also probably just because this is a Coke bottle from 1980, so I just think that they were probably more durable back then.
I was actually disappointed as a guest on the show again that you guys didn't do this research before I got here, like getting Coke bottles from around the world, testing them off of James's balcony.
That's true.
Guys.
This part is very intriguing that at first, that these people use it for such wonderful things. They use it to smooth out their skins, and they use it for music, to whistle inside of it, and they're making patterns in their clothing, and everyone is liking it at first. And it does turn very quickly into kind of a literally Cain and Abel kind of thing, where these two brothers, little boys, are fighting over the bottle, and one smashes the one over the head.
Now, here's another question I had. They make it a big point that this is the first thing from the civilized world, and that's why it had this evil influence on all of them. But in some of the shots, you can clearly see a woman with like a tin can that she's using. So like maybe it's an old rusted out tin can, not like a new shiny thing, but isn't that part of modern society too? Like, how come they never fought over the tin can?
I think it was some
Continuity
bark
error?
that looked like a can. That's what I'm going to say.
I'm going to call that a continuity error.
It's probably more like a Game of Thrones Starbucks cup. You just have to kind of pretend it wasn't there. The only other thing is to think of why Daenerys had a Starbucks cup. So you have two choices, Al.
Right. That very well may be true. But it bothered me because they were making such a point about the glass bottle. I was like, but you have a tin can. Nah, whatever.
But they ultimately decide that they have to get rid of this bottle, and a couple attempts to just bury it, it doesn't work, and an animal digs it up again. So he decides that he's going to walk until he reaches the edge of the earth, and then he's going to throw the evil thing off the side. And he doesn't know how long it's going to take. And it's a very sweet scene where he has to hug his kids goodbye, and he just goes just armed with his little bow and arrow, and he wanders off into the Kalahari Desert.
Right. And then we meet these revolutionary guys who are storming an embassy with machine guns, and they kill a bunch of people. And I'm like, wait a second. What movie am I watching? What happened to, like, the guy with the Coke bottle? It just takes a very weird turn.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you didn't really put a transition there into, now here comes a weird part in the film. I like that you just went right into it, because I agree. I mean, it literally has a narrator. Like, it could have just said, meanwhile, another crazy kind of human is 100 miles away here. But they didn't. It just cuts to these
Guerrilla Marxist revolutionaries.
Right, they look like, exactly, led by sort of, I guess, a Fidel Castro, Che Guevara. He's sort of supposed to look like this revolutionary. It's certainly an African nation, and they overthrow what appears to be black people in this government. And most of these revolutionaries, they seem to be black, but they're led by a guy that looks kind of, maybe he's Cuban. I don't know. It just looked a little weird to me. Did you notice that, Al?
I certainly did. It seemed like maybe there was a point to that, but if there was, it was lost on me. If it was a statement of some kind, I'm not quite sure what it is.
Right, like they could have fixed it very quickly by saying somehow the Cubans sent something to help the revolutionaries, blah, so we can control the trade of blah. That's all you need, but it was just very odd. I completely didn't remember this. In fact, I had forgotten entirely of the revolutionary subplot. But yeah, these revolutionaries, they've had a failed coup. They tried to assassinate the president of this country, and it failed. So these guys are sort of hiding in the jungle. I do love that there are these two soldiers in the film that no matter what's happening, no matter how much hellfire is raining from this helicopter above, all these two guys are interested in is playing some kind of card game.
Go fish.
Go fish or whatever it is. But the second they fire the missile that blows up the helicopter and saves all their lives and everyone's cheering, yay, these guys just immediately go off and play cards.
Wait, is it really Go Fish?
Prove that it's something else, Al.
I can't. Look, if you say they're playing Go Fish, I believe you, Joanna. You're our very special guest.
Oh, thanks, man. What else will you believe? There's such a slapstick element of this movie, because this movie is really such a slapstick movie in a lot of ways with some other interesting themes involved. But just the concept of these guards sneaking away for what would they possibly sneak away for? And it's to play cards in this crevasse in the desert. That's how they're goofing off. It's not to smoke cigarettes or to do drugs or to booze or hanky-panky. It's to play literally Go Fish or Old Maid. It's a very slapstick thing. It's like, that's when bad stuff happens. And it's like, wait a minute, 6 sausages, 6 guards, I thought there were 8. They're playing cards somewhere. It keeps it cartoony, and that's what the slapstick element of it, I think.
There is a lot of slapstick elements in this film.
Well, I mean, yeah, during this like scene where there's the fight between these revolutionaries and the government, there's guys who are literally tripping on bananas. Like the oldest like cartoon gag in the book, there are guys slipping on banana peels, but then 2 seconds later, a guy shoots a helicopter out of the sky with a bazooka. There's a lot of just these very different tones that the movie just kind of goes back and forth with, and I would say probably not very successfully.
How is this rated?
I'm going to guess G because it was released in 1980 and everything was rated G in 1980.
This wouldn't surprise me if I found out this was one of those Disney movies like Gus, one of those weird live action, no-name actor.
It was released by CAT Films.
Yeah, South African. But Al, did you watch this with your kids?
I did not. I didn't really know much about it, if it would be appropriate, and I don't know that they would have loved it, to be honest. But I did not watch it with them. It is PG. I just looked it up on IMDb.
And as abruptly as we meet these revolutionaries, we are now introduced to kind of the other co-stars of the film. There's a guy named Andrew and a woman named Kate.
Yeah, so it's Andrew Stein. I feel like they only refer to him by his last name, but he's a zoologist and he's looking at animal dung, presumably doing some very important work with the animal dung. They never really explain what it is. I think it's just supposed to be just your standard run-of-the-mill poop joke. But he has to meet a teacher who's coming to work in one of these remote schools. And we did see her early in the movie. She was a reporter, but then she decides she wants to be a teacher. And he takes this car to go and meet this woman. And it's a Jeep that doesn't really work. And he knows it doesn't really work. This sequence is really, really long of him trying to navigate the Jeep and trying to get it to stop because the brakes don't work. And if he turns the car off, it won't turn back on again. And there are all these gates that he has to open and close. And it's very difficult to do. And it's just as slapsticky as they come. The music that's playing over it, it's like this Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass kind of music.
It appears that somebody accidentally published this film at a 1.1x speed of the entire film.
No. There's a lot of parts that are sped up, but then a lot of parts that are slowed down. So at no point is it ever playing at the correct speed.
Okay, I'll give you that, right.
It's not all sped up. It's a lot sped up and a lot slowed down.
Correct. I only bring this up because I think that some of these slapstick things work for me because when it was running in sort of fast motion and that soldier slipped on a banana peel, I laughed because I thought this looked like something straight out of some old black and white French film, like something our dad would watch like late at night. And it's kind of Three Stooges-esque.
Yeah, and so every time Stein has some misadventure, he says, oi, oi, oi.
Yeah, can we talk about that?
Yes, let's talk about that.
We need to talk about the oi, oi, oi. I'm so glad you brought it up, Al.
He says it a lot. A lot. Even for a catchphrase, he says oi, oi, oi like 5 or 6 times in the span of 3 minutes. And it just stuck out at me because I hear oi, 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 and I think Yiddish, and this movie takes place in Africa, and I don't know if they say oi, oi, oi in Africa. Maybe they do. Maybe it's very common, but it just felt weird to me.
My guess is that it's an expression from the time. I don't think they're referencing the Eastern European Jewish, dialect.
Oi, 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 oi. That's how he says it.
Yes, that was spot on. All I could think of, and this is a little bit of an inside joke, so forgive me, the rest of our listeners, but James, remember in our fraternity, we had one guy who was pledging our Jewish fraternity who was from the Midwest, and he was just as white bread as they came, and every now and again he would say, oi, 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 and it was funny because, he wasn't Jewish, but he said it once every, week or two, and it was funny. This guy just says it over and over again, and it got really old really fast.
They do a lot of the same gags in the film, like the car that has no brakes and can never stop because it can't start up again. And this car is a total piece of crap. When he finally meets up with Kate, who was kind of sitting in the middle of nowhere in Botswana, but luckily, the Andrew meets up with her, Andrew Stein gets her, and his Jeep is so crappy that he has to remove the entire door to get her in. I thought that was funny. There's a part when they get to a gas station and the car is so crappy that the gas station attendants think that there's a windshield and they spray windshield fluid like right in Kate's face. He gets stuck when trying to cross a river. It's a bunch of little episodic gags, one after another.
Well, one of the gags that keeps happening over and over again is that Kate seems to think that Stein is trying to assault her because there's a warthog that's running through wherever they are, and he like tackles her to save her from the rampaging animal, but she's like, "Get off of me, you creep!" And then he's like, no, there was a warthog, and she didn't see the warthog. Why, you rascally guy, you. It's kept very lighthearted. Then the exact same gag happens, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes later, only this time it's a rhinoceros. Once again, she thinks that he's trying to attack her, and he's like, no, I swear. But she really seems convinced that he's being really aggressive, but she's kind of okay with it. Like, none of this makes any sense. It doesn't make sense once, but then it happens again, and it's just extra weird.
They run into these people that are local, and he speaks, Stein speaks to them in their native language. He's like, "Hey, didn't you see a rhinoceros coming by?" And they both in unison shake their heads, "No." And it turns out, according to Stein, that means yes, according to these people. But, he's like, "Did you see a rhinoceros?" And both of them shake their head, "No." So once again, she's like, even these people don't agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, this whole scene just kind of makes me not buy that they're going to hook up later, which even watching it the first time, I'm like, okay, they're definitely going to end up as a couple later.
But, like, the rhino did stamp out the fire. You saw it. I saw it.
But she didn't see it.
And I thought about that. How did she not see it? Like, she climbed up that tree. It's like a freaking rhino.
Right. And I assume you would have felt the ground move from a rhino. So, but I think in the end, once she finds out what kind of man he is, not that he's a good man, but actually that he is a complete bumbling fool around the woman, presumably maybe until he gets to know her, but I don't think this guy would be capable of walking up to a woman without just like tripping over himself. So later she retroactively forgives him. She's in the middle of nowhere camping out literally in like the Kalahari desert, with some strange man.
Right. And so like you're just kind of waiting for these storylines to converge because you know that they're going to at some point. And then Key does come across Stein and Kate, and he assumes that they're gods because they're wearing these weird clothes, and he tries to give them the Coke bottle, and they're like, "Why are you trying to hand us that? We don't want it." So that's kind of that. Then they kind of go off on their way. Kate gets picked up by this other guy, Jack, who's like a local safari guide, and he's much more suave and debonair than Stein. And poor Stein goes back to his little camp and he's licking his wounds that, "Oh, if only I could talk to a girl, golly gee shucks."
Yeah, apparently the director, who has an unpronounceable last name, his name is Uys.
Uys?
Sure, that guy.
Oys, 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 oys.
Love it. Yeah, apparently that was autobiographical. He claimed that he was completely a bumbling idiot in front of any female.
Aww.
I've seen people like that. I've seen both men and women that are almost bumbling fools in front of the opposite sex.
As the kids say.
Or, their attracted sex. So, it isn't totally far-fetched there. But Andrew decides he fakes a reason to visit her at the school. I think she forgot some like scarf or something.
Or her shoes.
Yeah, her shoes. It's a leave behind. He wants to have a reason to talk to her again.
Classic.
And he comes to the school, and I thought this was a very funny slapstick scene, actually. But
really?
I did. I thought it was cute. He walks into the classroom, and then he's tripping over himself, and then as he lifts his head up, he knocks the blackboard over again, and he tries to put it up, and the whole thing falls over again. It may have gone over, I would say, maybe one fall too many, but I thought that the gag was actually kind of funny. I think this actor is a good physical comedian.
I think it was about 87 falls too many.
It's truly slapstick, and I love slapstick. Don't get me wrong, we were raised on slapstick. I think a little bit one or too many, especially the gate gag. I mean, that went on for, I want to say 2 full minutes. That's a long time. With the gate and the rock and the,
My guess is they filmed like 87 knockdowns, and they were all kind of funny, but they should have realized, just put forward, it's not as funny after the 7th one. That's probably what happened.
Probably. But so then the revolutionaries show back up. They come to the school, and at first I thought that they were going to be like recruiting child soldiers, which is a thing that tragically happens. That's not what they're doing there. They're just there to use the kids as human shields, which is also a horrible thing that I guess can happen in real life. But they just decide to set up all of these kids and walk for however many miles to get to wherever their new hideout's going to be. And the kids are their insurance that no one's going to come and try to assassinate him because he's surrounded by kids. Meanwhile, Key gets arrested for quote unquote stealing somebody's goat. I mean, he just is trying to kill the goat to eat it because he, needs sustenance on his journey. But he's arrested.
He's probably on private property or something. That's what's presumed.
Right.
But he doesn't have any concept of private property. And when he kills the goat and someone yells at him, he even says, hey, I killed this goat. There's plenty for both of us. Come sit down. We'll both eat it. But, he's arrested.
Well, is he arrested or is he shot in the back? Because, the cop comes and fires his gun, and then he falls down. And I wasn't sure if he just fell down because of the sound or if he was hit.
Oh, he's definitely hit in the leg, because he has a bandage around his leg, and one of Andrew Stein's friends happens to be someone that speaks the dialect of Key. So it turns out that Key is sentenced to 3 months in jail, and he's never seen a wall in his life, and he's not going to eat any of this strange food, so he's going to die in jail. So they talk to the jailer, who kind of is sympathetic, and he says, look, we can kind of make up some kind of work release program, and they all come to the idea that he knows the land better than anyone, so he'll come to be on our team, and we'll sign him off, and he'll be under our care, sort of a work parole release.
Right. I did appreciate the fact that they explain how Stein's friend speaks this language, because they make such a point in the beginning of the movie that they've never seen anyone from the civilized world. I'm like, wait a second. So how does this guy speak their language? It is, I guess, kind of a plot hole if you take it literally in the beginning that they never encountered anyone. But he says that he spent some time living with them. That's how he knows it. So, okay.
It's not just spent some time living with them. It's a storyline completely copied from your sister's most hated film of all time.
I assume you mean Dances with Wolves?
She says she hates that film.
She also said she never saw it.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. She said she only hates it because it beat Goodfellas for Best Picture.
Oh, I feel her on that.
So, but
fair.
in Dances with Wolves, the reason why Stands with a Fist character, the reason why she speaks the Native American language is because her parents were killed as a kid, and she fled into the plains of America, and then she was raised by this tribe. That's exactly what happens to this guy, Sam. He says that revolutionaries came, something killed his parents or something, and these wonderful people took him in, and he's like, they're the most wonderful people in the world, so I have to help this guy. It was a very sweet, unnecessary, necessary for the plot, but, for this kind of film, it was a sweet and very well acted and delivered monologue by this actor.
I guess so. So now all of the stories converge because Stein has Key, and then they happen to encounter the revolutionaries who are with Kate and the hostages, and Key basically infiltrates their group pretending to be one of the school kids, and he uses his knowledge of tranquilizers to get all of the bad guys, to make them think that they got stung by a bug or something, but they were hit with this tranquilizer, so they're all going to fall asleep. Kate can grab the guns and they can escape. It could maybe be considered clever, but then as all of the bad guys are falling asleep and there's this rockabye baby music going in the background, like I I just couldn't with the Rockabye Baby.
Come on, you loved it.
It was fine.
Was it though?
Well, first of all, I think it's very clever that he saves the day here, because they had totally demonstrated earlier that in the first part of the film, I think the first minute or two, that he knows exactly how to do this, and he's very good with the bow and arrow, and even these small little bow and arrow thing he has. So it's a good plan. The only thing is those two guys have snuck off to play some cards again. So they only knocked out 6 of the revolutionaries, not 8.
Right, and then it's up to Stein to save the day. Even though he's a bumbling fool, he's able to do it.
First, he finds that one of them is underneath a snake. So he throws the rock, the snake falls on the guy, and they incapacitate him. Now he has a gun. So now it's one gun versus the last guy with the gun. And this is the only other part of the film that I really remembered, because I didn't quite get it as a kid. And I also thought this would have been a perfect time for Key to save the day, to kind of point out to Andrew, oh, look what he's under. But I guess Andrew, being a biologist, I guess is feasible that he knows it as well. But apparently the final bad guy is underneath a tree that I think the leaves or the bark or something has this sap inside that I presume is either acidic or very painful, and it drips on him and he's in horrible pain, and they're able to incapacitate him.
Wikipedia said it was latex.
Really?
So maybe he had a horrible latex allergy.
Maybe, but then finally, the cavalry comes in and they pour some water on this guy to stop whatever reaction he's having. And all I could think was that they used an awful lot of fresh water in the middle of a desert to stop the bad guy from itching, when there's 50 kids who have been marching through the desert for miles. Maybe save some of the fresh water for the kids, not so that the bad guy doesn't get a really bad ouchie rash.
To be fair, they are right next to their every 10 to 20 mile food station.
Oh, that's right. And they upped it to 10 miles, so.
Oh, okay. So that's enough to just give a couple of kids water every 10 miles. You are so not a father, James. And then Jack shows up and pretends to be the hero, and Stein's all upset about it. But then Stein goes back to her, and he has this bumbling moment where he's trying to explain to her that he's all thumbs around her, but he's really a nice guy. And he just keeps putting the thing on the table, and the thing keeps falling off the table, and it just goes on way too long. But then she kisses him, because isn't it sweet that he's bumbling now, I guess, apparently?
That's all you need, baby.
Is that your kind of guy, a guy who just drops things over and over and over again?
It's charming, I guess. Oh, God, I don't know. I remember when I was a little kid thinking, even as a kid, that scene where she calls him over to help because she's wrapped up in that prickly bush, and they're doing this G-rated dirty dancing in her underwear, very intimately close, and they're touching but not touching, and they're moving around each other's bodies. Even when I was a kid, I was like, really, guys? Come on, get a room. Right? It seemed so gratuitous to me.
Right. And then there's some piece of jewelry or something that he doesn't know what to do with, so he just puts it in her underwear.
Right. He just opens up the back of her, and she doesn't have a problem with that or notice it.
Yeah.
But their storyline finishes on a high note, and so does Key's. He keeps walking. He winds up going all the way to what you presume is these cliffs off the side of Africa.
It's a real place, and the name of it is God's Window, which is interesting considering the title of the movie.
It's an absolute gorgeous sight that kind of looks like, if you didn't know any better, this looks like the edge of the world. I mean, it's basically the edge of a huge canyon with clouds filling up the entire base of the cliff. So he thinks he's found the end of the world. He tosses the Coca-Cola bottle, and having fulfilled his mission, he just turns around and he's able to find his way back, presumably without much problem. And the film ends with his adorable little son running into his daddy's arms.
And then the credits roll, and Yeah, that's the end of this movie. The DVD that I rented from the library came with The Gods Must Be Crazy 2. And I was curious enough to read the description on Wikipedia, but not curious enough to actually watch the thing. Have you guys seen it? Was that one of your VHSs that you ever watched?
No, I remember that this film did have a theatrical release, and I did read today about how it was made in 1985 and not released until 1990, so that alone can probably tell you all you need to know about this film. But I remember when it came out in the theater kind of rolling my eyes and being like, really? Like, the guy meets modern civilization, he goes back to primitive world. Like, there's not much more you have to tell. And I did the same thing as you, Al. I read the Wikipedia synopsis, I was curious. And it's basically kind of a little more of the same. He has wacky interactions with the modern people, and then I think he saves the day at the end. And I think that's the same thing with The Gods Must Be Crazy in Hong Kong, and The Gods Must Be Funny in China, which is also known as Gods Must Be Crazy 4.
There's one with vampires, apparently, or at least a vampire.
And there's presumably a sixth one that was filmed with a Japanese theme, but there's no evidence that it exists.
Apparently he's huge in China, this actor.
But yeah, I mean, this is all according to like Wikipedia and IMDb, so I didn't do too much sleuthing. But that's the film. Joanna, as our guest, does this film stand the test of time?
It's funny because this is a movie that, of the dozens of movies that James and I grew up watching over and over and over on these grainy VHS films, mostly with our older brother. And there was a couple dozen that were in the rotation for years at a time. Thanks, Dad. Shout out. This is one of the ones we probably watched about 15 times. And I have pretty visceral memories of a lot of the scenes, but not much of an opinion of how I felt about it or liked it. I guess it was okay. I was really curious to see how it would hold up. And even before watching it, I was like, this is probably racist. And I actually, I was kind of on the defensive watching it, to be honest. And I think I want to spend a little more time watching it, but I do want to mention that I watched this movie with someone of a younger generation who is, in their 20s, and it was incredibly cringy to them. I think it was a little difficult to watch because, if you have a liberal arts education of any kind, you're really shy of looking at things in the lens of like civilization versus primitivism and making societies like this seem quaint and cute. And that's a really delicate thing that could be offensive. And it almost seems like, well, it could be that old trope of, well, how could it be offensive? It's cute. Like, how lovable is this guy's face? He has the most lovable smile and laugh in the world. And how could that be insulting? But I think it can be a little problematic, and I wasn't sure really how I felt about it. So I did a little research. And of course, I've only looked into this for the past couple of days, but I haven't really been able to read a convincing analysis of why it's offensive and racist, other than that the prevailing sentiment at the time was that it glossed over apartheid. It made it very cartoonish. Black and white people were totally fine with each other in this movie. And it was just kind of bumbling and peaceful. And it was completely not like this. I think that's how it could be considered offensive. But I'm trying to separate that from just how I feel about it on a personal level. And I don't know, I think I kind of outgrew it a little bit because I found it a little boring and long, especially like we were discussing with some of the slapstick scenes. They just went on a little too long for me. And the plots never really tied up together. And I was like, why are they doing this? It was just kind of confusing and sloppy. And it's interesting to me that it was such a remarkable international hit for a long time after its release. It made a lot of money after its release in many other countries, including the United States. I guess I don't really understand, and I do not think it could be made today. I don't think it's a problematic film necessarily to condone or root for, but I didn't really enjoy seeing it again. It just kind of left me with a cringy, weird feeling. I do not think it stands the test of time, gentlemen.
So, Al, what do you think? Does this film stand the test of time?
I definitely don't think it stands the test of time. I mean, it's definitely problematic in the way that they portray the people in Africa, the whole glossing over the actual history of what was going on is definitely an issue. And it is a shame because I do think that the conceit of the movie about these people who have never been touched by civilization find a Coke bottle, I think that's really interesting. And like how they react to it, I think like the first, 10 minutes or so, like as they discover jealousy because of this thing that we consider garbage, but to them is so important. And then they decide it's evil. Like, I think that's really interesting, but they just completely fumble it from there. Then it becomes about these murderers who want to kill people, but it's also a love story, but it's like a bumbling guy love story. This movie can't get its tone right. Like, is it a zany, silly comedy where these bumbling idiots are tripping over themselves? Well, yeah, it is. But then these zany, bumbling bad guys are firing machine guns at children. So now it's not so silly anymore. I think it wants to strike a balance and just kind of be more silly, but it doesn't work. It doesn't land. I've talked about my hatred of voiceover more times than I can count. This movie's voiceover bothered me for a different reason than the usual way. Usually voiceover annoys me because it's Forrest Gump saying, Lieutenant Dan was really angry that day, while you see Lieutenant Dan like screaming and having a fit. Yeah, we don't need the voiceover to tell us that. This voiceover was annoying just because I just found the guy's voice grating, and it's pretty much all you hear for the first 15 minutes of the film. Also, who is this guy? If it's a nature documentary and it's a guy who spent some time with these people, then you should see him there. But it's not. He's just an omniscient narrator who not only speaks their language and does the helpful thing of translating, but he also knows what Key is thinking. How does he know what Key is thinking? There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of quote-unquote comedy that's not very funny. It does not stand the test of time, in my opinion. James, what do you think?
Well, congratulations, Al. You got to squeeze in. Once again, you hate Forrest Gump. Yay, Al, reminding everyone.
Yay.
Thank
you. The documentary does say what Key is thinking. You're right. How could he possibly know what Key is thinking? But have you ever really watched these BBC Earth and Richard Attenborough, like a nature documentary? They make this stuff up all the time, like some mating dance, and then they're like, and now he's going to impress the lady. You don't know what he's doing. Like, you have no idea. Oh, and now he must clean the area first by licking. Like, maybe he's just licking himself. Like, you don't know that that's part of the ritual. Like, this is something that nature documentarians do. And I have to say that, yes, there are definitely problems with this film, like, why is a Cuban leading a revolution in some presumably black-run part of Africa? If you're looking for something to be mad at, yes, I could just say right away, yes, this is wrong, this film, but I'm not exactly sure why. I'm willing to read an essay on why this film is really problematic. I will say, based on what you said, Joanna, I don't think the film necessarily has the responsibility to talk about the Rhodesians or whatever. And, this film takes place presumably in 1980, but this could really take place 300 years from now. It doesn't really matter. And I think the film actually, if it was treating Key and its tribe like, oh, look at these natives or savages or any, really weird word. No, they treat them, the quote-unquote modern people, just as kind of stupid and maybe in a lot of ways stupider than Key. And they don't have the relaxation and they have a lot more stresses. I think the film definitely is helped by that first montage of how modern society is, they really have to follow a clock and Key's tribe doesn't. The film really is in some ways aided by its really poor production values. I think if this film was filmed and shot beautifully, then I think there would be a lot more problems I have with this film. I found parts of it that are problematic. I think there's no need to make 5 sequels, but if it employed this actor, good for him. And for me, I think the film is kind of harmless. I didn't think it was as offensive as I kind of thought it would be. I thought there were parts that were weird, and apparently they might be remaking this film. So for me, I'm going to say this film stands up. I see what you're saying, and I find it very interesting, Joanna, that you saw it with someone that, a much younger person. And, I'm willing to hear a reason why this is so problematic. But, for what it is, it's kind of a stupid little film that there's parts that don't hold up, but overall I think the film's a little too long and some of the slapstick is a little silly. But for me, it's a harmless little film that it holds up, and it's stupid. It's stupid, but it holds up.
No, you're wrong.
I very well might be wrong on this one.
You are definitely wrong. I also feel like you hate slapstick comedies in like a lot of other movies that we've seen. You've complained about slapstick comedies, and this time you're giving it a pass. I just want to point out that inconsistency.
You're right. I absolutely, to this day, I can't stand the opening scene of Superman 3. So there we go. It's 2-1, and to be fair, this is not one of those...
not a hill you're gonna die on?
Yeah, this is not a hill I'm gonna die on. I definitely, at a future episode, may say, hey, thanks, users. You pointed me to some very insightful essays. But that being said, I have not read those yet, so this particular verdict may not stand the test of time.
Oh, it doesn't. You're wrong.
But that being said, right now it's 2-1.
Well, Joanna, I'm glad we had a brief on this episode who was talking some not nonsense.
Who's dropping some knowledge and some woke science and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that I'm awesome and I'm right and Jamie's wrong.
We love having you on. You've got to come back again. I believe you mentioned at one point coming back on to talk about UHF. Is that right?
Please. Yeah, because I just went to Spatula City the other day and I was just like, you know what? That takes me back to this great little movie called UHF.
Right. Let's do that. Come back again real soon. Next week, we're going to be talking about a very different movie that may be just as problematic. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen it. Showgirls, with Elizabeth Berkley, a.k.a. Jessie Spano, in the role that proved that she wasn't just a teen star anymore.
I have never seen this film.
We are going to have a good time talking about that movie. Of this, I am sure. Tune in next week. In the meantime, you know where we are. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We love hearing from you. Don't forget to subscribe, rate us on Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.